I'm Dane Rose, chairman of Happiness Data, a California nonprofit with a focus on the overlap of culture and well-being. Perhaps the most important question to start with is what causes homelessness? Homelessness is the biggest humanitarian epidemic in Marin County, and it's been on the rise decade after decade for 4 decades in a row. 50 or so years ago in Marin County, homelessness did not exist, and we are likely in the next decade to see more homelessness than ever before. Now, since none of us in school, including our homeless, dreamed or aspired to become homeless, and since no sane person set out to create more and more homelessness in the 5th wealthiest county in what is considered a first world country, what is it that we've done collectively in Marin to generate this steady increase in homelessness? And this chart shows it all. If you look at the bottom line, it's the average income of a Marin resident. In fact, income has been broken down into 5 pieces. You have the lowest quintile of income, the second lowest, the third lowest, the 4th lowest, and then you have the highest quintile of income in Marin. And if you look at this chart, in detail, you see that for 60% of Marin residents, income has not been keeping up with the cost of housing. And for the second wealthiest group, income has been keeping up with the price of housing. And for the top income group, income has been going up much faster than the cost of housing over the last 50 years. Now, we're considered a somewhat rational culture, and if we were to say tomorrow that every home in Marin would cost $100 million, we would instantly create 99% homelessness, because 99% of the people in Marin could not afford a $100 million home. And that gets to the heart of the issue. It's not a crime that a burger flipper cannot afford a $650,000 home. Rather, if there is a crime, the crime has to be considered a cultural dynamic that has led to the lowest priced home available in Marin, costing $650,000. Now, to get to this number, you start with the cheapest piece of land that is buildable in Marin. You then look at what is the smallest home that you are allowed to build. Now, on my land in Marin County, it's in San Rafael, but it's designated county land, I am not allowed by law to build a house that is less than 650, or that's less than 1,200 square feet. So you take a 1,200 square foot home, and that's the smallest they will allow you to apply for a building permit. And you apply more than 1,000 separate laws and codes to that 1,200 square feet. And you look around for a builder, and you call around and you see what is the lowest price that a builder is able to follow all the laws and codes in Marin and build the cheapest possible 1,200 square foot home. And then you go to the building department and pay the $50,000 hookup to MMWD and the $30,000 to have your plans processed and the tens of thousands of dollars to an architect. Because if you go to community development, and I have, they will say, don't even attempt to do this on your own. Get an architect, right? And so you go to an architect. Well, how much will it cost to draw up plans that would satisfy Marin County? And it will cost tens of thousands of dollars. And so we've got a built-in, $100,000 starting point just to get plans. And then there'll be the site study and the survey and the various things which add tens of thousands more. And you add up all of these bills for the cheapest possible home that is legal in Marin. And lo and behold, the cheapest land, the cheapest builder, the smallest legal size, and the most basic way of doing it. And your bill will come to more than $650,000. Now, we consider ourselves a free market economy. But is it a free market when there is a monopoly called the Marin County Community Development Agency and all their various permits? Because there's no competition in being able to get a permit for less. Now, I've built in different parts of the country, and some building departments will happily process plans in 1 month for $2,000. I was advised at Marin County it would take up to 3 years, and it would be at least $30,000 just for them to hold up the project for 2 or 3 years. And they would ask for a number of additional engineering reports, environmental assessments that are going to cost tens of thousands more. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that each of these are monopoly generated, meaning there's no other vendor in a free market economy. In other words, we're not dealing with a free market economy. We're dealing with multiple monopolies. And the fees are not going to our homeless. They're not going to the public. They're going to pay the salaries of local building departments and government officials. So when Marin charges more than 10 times the price of other places in the country to process permits, all of that money goes to fund the bureaucracy, which creates more and more of the 1,000 laws and codes, every one of which has a correlation with the increased cost of housing. Meaning every one of those 1,000 laws and codes increases, doesn't decrease, increases the cost of a legal residence in Marin. And the conclusion is that it is illegal in Marin County to build a home for less than $650,000. Now, there is no law directly because, that would be a little bit too blatant. There's no direct law that says you will be thrown in jail and your property will be seized if you build a home for less than $650,000. Rather, if you do not follow all of these 1,000 codes and laws, your price will be more than $650,000, and often a lot more. And if you do not follow these laws, we will evict you from your own land. We will take your home and property. We will not issue a permit. We will throw you in jail if necessary. If you want to do a complete solar roof on your house with no connection to PG&E, that is illegal. If you want to harvest rainwater or seasonal runoff through the land, I have more than 1 million gallons running through my land, just seasonal runoff, that goes into the bay as pollutants and causes soil erosion. If I, instead of paying a $50,000 MMWD hookup, build a $100,000 or 100,000 gallon cistern, that is illegal. So it is illegal to bypass the local sewer department and use a composting toilet, which is more sustainable. It is illegal to harvest rainwater and bypass MMWD, which is more sustainable. It is illegal to bypass the permitting department, which saves money. It is illegal to build, in my case, less than a 1,200 square foot home. So more than 1,000 laws enforceable by prison terms, fines, property seizure, and a variety of penalties to build an affordable house in Marin. Now, if we know that 60% of Marin residents will struggle or downright fail in applying for a loan, because how many people, being a barber, being a burger flipper, being a newspaper delivery boy, how many people in Marin have the income for what we're willing to pay them in Marin for doing jobs that need doing? Meaning, do you not want your hair cut in Marin? Do you not want to be able to go down to a restaurant and order burgers and fries? Because suddenly the price is $100 a burger? We're not paying 3/5. We're not paying single mothers a penny. We're not paying hairdressers. We're not paying a good chunk of our residents enough money, and we are unwilling to pay them enough money to afford a $650,000 home. We are willing to pass more than 1,000 separate laws in the form of codes, zones, and laws related to permitting and monopolies that guarantee the price will be more than $650,000. So what causes homelessness? It is the graph of continually exerting monopoly pressure to increase the cost of housing beyond and uncorrelated to any effort to increase the income of 2/3 of Marin residents. In other words, you can take any population of 100,000 people anywhere in the world, and you can, by law, pass laws that make sure that homes sell for significantly more than 2/3 of the population can afford, and you will see an increase in homelessness. So that's how we've caused homelessness. We've caused it by institutionalizing and making all forms of low-cost housing illegal, step by step by step. I can go through more than 1,000 codes and laws that are necessary in Marin to apply for a building permit and to get an occupancy permit. And every single one of those laws increases the cost of a legal residence in Marin. So it's not an accident when I go to Thailand or other countries where the average monthly wage is $350. There is no homelessness. Homelessness exists in those areas, largely Western countries, that have made housing a monopoly in the local building departments, where you cannot erect a a teepee. You cannot erect a yurt. You cannot put a camper. You cannot build a little 100 square foot garden shed and use it as a sleeping area on your own land. I called Marin County and they said it was illegal to camp on my land. I was just curious, what are my options as a Marin landowner? Is it legal to camp? No. Is it legal to store anything of mine on my land? It is illegal. Is there anything that I can do on my own land before applying for a 1,200 square foot minimum building permit, which will add up to more than the $650,000? And the answer is no. They will consider, continue to tax, and in Marin County, you will pay some of the highest taxes in the world, having built your $650,000 home. I actually talked with one homeless person who has the money to build and construct their home. They don't have the money for the property taxes, though, so they're camping out in the park. So this is how we've caused homelessness to a degree and in specific ways that exceeds homelessness in much poorer countries. And we've used public money to increase the cost of homelessness each step of the way. And we're using public money to enforce the seizure of property, the imprisonment, the fines, etc., if anyone tries to bypass the monopoly. So this is the simplest way. I mean, there are other things. You could also look at our education program, because if you look at one of the clips below of a person who's traveling around and grazing goats and doing things off of their bicycle, all of that is illegal. But you have to wonder why a single mother would allow herself by her own government with her own tax money to evict her and just tell her to do nothing, just to basically break the law on a daily basis and just go along with it. Why would our homeless go along with this so passively? Because it is an engineered humanitarian crisis. A homeless person loses 26 years of their life. If someone is homeless for a lifespan, 26 years of their life just goes up in smoke. So that's almost half of a life. Now, if your local government comes to you and says, sorry, we did not accommodate your needs for safe, legal housing. We plugged up every single loophole so that now every single day you live is a crime. How do you like that? I mean, this is insane. But where does that passivity come from on the part of thousands of Marin homeless, most of which have been long-term Marin residents before being evicted from their legal homes for the crime that their building departments have plugged up all cost-effective housing in Marin County? And you look at our education system, and we do not teach thinking. We do not teach ethics. We teach route learning. We teach following orders. The majority of our homeless were told that if they worked hard, got a job, that they could pursue the American dream. They weren't told that if they wanted to be a barber in Marin County, that they'd have to be homeless. They weren't told that if they were working their way up and couldn't afford a $650,000 home, they weren't told that they would become criminals. They were told they could be happy and pursue the American dream. But it does not take very much intelligence to understand this graph. Every single year that housing prices diverge from the average income of a Marin resident is a direct mathematical correlation with the amount of homelessness. If there is a crime, the crime lies in the more than 1,000 laws enforced with public money that directly and chronically contribute to higher housing prices decade after decade, year after year, with no willingness to bend. As the largest humanitarian crisis in Marin unfolds before our eyes, decade after decade after decade. The messages within homelessness are clear. Now, if you're a homeless person, let's say you're a mother of two, and you did not want to be beaten again. It was getting a little bit too hot in your domestic partnership. You have a very difficult decision to make. Do you teach your children about compromising out of fear of being on the street to domestic violence? Do you leave before it gets that bad and risk being on the street? This is a decision I have talked with multiple women that they are asked to make because a single mother taking care of her children cannot, unless she is born into money, afford a $650,000 home. Does she stay silent? Does she lie and cover her abuser because she doesn't want to lose the school system? What is the message to that mother when not one Marin resident, when not one building official has said, oh, it's been 40 years now. Your income is this, housing prices are this. Your income is this, housing prices are this. We're responsible for the majority of the increase in housing? Because we could have made it illegal to pass a law that made people build a minimum square footage, build a house of a minimum amount of square feet. Who has the right in Marin to pass a law that says you have to build a 1,200 square foot house, knowing that that law will create homelessness? Who has that right? Well, one of the problems in corrupt power structures is a democracy is, of course, supposed to be for the people, by the people. And by the people, 60% of Marin residents, that's the majority of people, are struggling or unable to pay for a $650,000 home, the cheapest home you can buy in Marin. 60% are struggling to pay for that home. So what competent government passes 1,000 laws, each of which increase the cost of housing, but doesn't increase the cost of income? We're not going to increase your ability to buy the homes. We're going to increase the cost of the homes by law. You can't get around us. We won't give you an occupancy permit. We'll haul you away. We'll fine you. You were sleeping in your home without an occupancy permit. Take them to jail. You know, it's worth mentioning, I'm a landscape designer and installer, and so I see and talk with clients after going through the building process in Marin. And one of my clients called me frantically because they were denied an occupancy permit to move into their home, well over $650,000, right, by law. And they couldn't move in. They said, Dane, I need you to draw up a drip irrigation plan for MMWD. And you have to follow all their regulations. And otherwise, they're not going to let me move into my home. And I said, have you figured out your planting plan yet? And he said, no, I'm not really there. Just throw in some plants. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I haven't lived in the house. So in order to satisfy MMWD, we have to create a fictitious planting plan for someone who hasn't even had the chance to move into their home, and then spell out in detail which dripper we're going to put on every single plant. And he said, how much is that going to cost me? And I said, well, it probably cost about $600 to put in the drip system. But I'm going to have to go through the bureaucracy here. So it's going to cost you $600 to have me draw up the plans to put in a drip system that would only cost $600 to install. He said, you got to do it because they won't let me move into my house. Now, this is a wealthy individual who can't move into his house without hiring a professional to draw up a drip system design. That's one of the 1,000 laws. Now, if each law only added $1,000, we're talking 1,000 laws. You know, this is an incredible expense to burden every single Marin resident with, and they have no choice. It's not the home of the brave in the land of the free. It's the home of the bureaucrats and the scurrying, frantic residents of Marin trying to keep up with the bureaucracy that their own tax dollars have funded. Now, I drew up the plans, charged him the money. Now, it was a little difficult because when I called MMWD and I said, you know, what do you need here? They said, the two people you need to talk with are on vacation. That's a nice setup, isn't it? Tell someone they can't move into their house without a set of plans, and then the people you need to talk with about the plans are on vacation? How many hotel bills have to be allocated for this level of incompetence? So that people who write laws saying you cannot live in your own home without scaled drawings showing a drip system can go on vacation. And it must be nice to have such a secure job knowing that nobody can go anywhere else in the county and legally build. That's an abuse of power. Now, the message that is given to that mother of two is you're not important. Tax revenue is important. Money is important. You are not important. And she knows it. Now, what about the message of 1,000 people a day driving by chronically homeless people on our streets. What is the message they receive? That they're cared for by their government? That someone's working out how they can afford to move into an affordable, legal place to sleep? Or that this is a schizophrenic government? Because one of the interesting things that I find as a professional is one of the most efficient areas of Marin County is its complaint department. If you call up Marin County or the police and you say, someone just dug up a wetland, this is a designated wetland, and you say, well, what's that? Well, that's 6 inches of water and some weeds, right? So 6 inches of water, some weeds, and someone just scooped a scoop of dirt out of that. So how many? Let's say 1,000 weeds are scooped out of the wetland. Well, this will get an urgent response from Marin County. Oh, they will show up in patrol cars. You cannot dig a scoop of wetland. 1,000 grasses. We've got to protect those grasses. If there's a stray dog around, or you didn't register your dog with the Humane Society, you will get letters, do this immediately. So we do care about bits of grass in Marin, and we do care about unregistered dogs in Marin. And well done. It's nice to know that a developing, a first world country with the 5th wealthiest county, in the entire country, can take care of grass and can take care of dogs. It's a great accomplishment. But it's worth noting that there is no place to call and say there is a lonely, traumatized veteran with PTSD who doesn't know where he's going to sleep. Could somebody come to his rescue? No. That's not our problem. Grass is our problem. Dogs are our problem. Human beings, not our problem. But wasn't it human beings who paid your salary? Wasn't it local residents that paid your salary? Grass didn't pay your salary. Dogs didn't pay your salary. And wasn't that done on the promise that this was for the people? Now, that does not make any sense to the human areas of the brain. Grass, dogs, traumatized veteran. What's wrong with the picture? There's nothing wrong with saving grass. There's nothing wrong with saving dogs. I just thought traumatized veterans would be higher on the list, or at least somewhere on the list. And they are not. There is not a single phone number that you can call in Marin to get intelligent help for someone on the street. The visits by the police are more likely to be unfriendly. In China Camp, the Parks Department in China Camp and the Friends of China Camp decided to hire barbier security. I went and talked with the guard. Because if you've been kicked out of your home as a single mother, and your salary is never going to buy that Marin home, you might think, well, I'm not doing any harm. Why don't I drive out to China Camp and sleep in my van? I can afford a van with my burger flipping job, with my teaching job. I can do this. It's not going to hurt anyone. Let me just sleep the night through until I work something out. Well, the Friends of China Camp do not like this idea. They don't want our most vulnerable women, children, unemployed, veterans, to have a safe, legal place to sleep in their van. So local cities have passed a variety of laws making it illegal to sleep in their car. But so, of course, they go further afield. And this is not good enough. We have to further traumatize our most vulnerable people whose sole crime is being poor. And by poor, I mean whose sole crime is not being able to afford a $650,000 home. That's poor in Marin. That's their crime. Barbier Security is paid by Friends of China Camp and the Park Service to patrol the long and winding road around China Camp to wake people up who are already jittery, to make sure they don't get a good night's sleep, and tell them. I asked the security guard, what do you tell them? He said, I have to tell them they can't stay here. So I said, where do you tell them to go? He said, there's nowhere for them to go. I'm being paid to tell them to not sleep in the most intelligent place they can sleep. It's not in a neighborhood. They're surrounded by wetlands out, in the distant area in China Camp. That's mostly bog, so they're not doing any harm. The park is closed. It's not disturbing anyone. That is an intelligent part for a marginalized, traumatized group of people to escape their community. And yet, money is being spent not to house them, not to give them support, not to give them better options. Public money is being spent to harass them in the middle of the night. Now, if that doesn't seem a little bit cold, maybe we've gotten a little bit numb. Because one has to be pretty high on the sociopathic continuum to think that what we really need in this culture is more tyranny, more public money harassing the most vulnerable people in the community. And there's a message in that behavior. Your money matters more than you do. And that same message could be extended to all of us. We just need to raise the price of home to $100 million a home. And we can all be homeless and all be treated poorly by our local police, security agencies, Park Service, for the crime of not being able to afford a $100 million home. Because there is some price at which every single person becomes homeless. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. You raise the home to $300 billion, you are homeless. So there's a tremendous number of messages that are given that are rippling out through the entire county. Every time you drive by a homeless person and do nothing, the message is human beings do not matter, and they hear it loud and clear. Your message is delivered and it is received. You're not going to bat for them in the local council meetings. The building department is passing another law that's putting housing further out of reach. They understand that human beings are not important. Money possessed by the ones who have the most of it is important. A homeless person who can't feed themselves and is kicked out of a business understands that their life is less important than $10. It is a dangerous precedent to pretend, and it is a pretense that collapses with pressure, to pretend that money is more important than the human beings who invented it, who invented the system of distributing it, who invented the laws that govern it, and that made it in the first place. Many people are so indoctrinized in a capitalist framework that they truly believe that money is more important than the human beings it was intended to serve. It's important in grasping the catastrophe that is the humanitarian crisis of homelessness to understand what its impacts are. Because your government will not inform you about these impacts. Your police, your mayor. You'll never get a letter presented to you that shares the full cost of each homeless person in Marin County. So let's look at some of the impacts. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone set out to create these particular consequences or impacts related to homelessness. However, for every 1,000 people that we deny the right to safe, legal housing that they are capable of affording, a right that existed 500 years ago to every Miwok tribe member, none of whom had to apply for a permit, none of whom had to apply for a mortgage, none of whom were asked for mortgage insurance, none of whom had to get $200,000 jobs to apply for the right to purchase a home. The members of the land that we live in Marin, was once occupied by the Miwok tribe, and they were not homeless. As we have engineered this crisis by consistently increasing home prices without consistently increasing income for 60% of Marin residents at the same speed, we generate the following impacts. Number one, more fires. It's just basic common sense. If you've got a gas range or an electric stove in a house that's built to reasonable fire codes, you are much less likely to start a fire than if you have been evicted from your home, regularly traumatized, woken up at night by Friends of China Camp, courtesy of Barbier Security, that having to learn how to start fires and cook food, you may not be as safe as if you were in a legal home. Homelessness and California fires have both risen in frequency parallel to one another, and it's not an accident. We pretend we do not have enough money to house our people. We pay the money in spades for every fire that gets out of control. More ER visits. The Marin General Hospital will not return calls or emails to explain how much the public pays every year for homeless ER visits. However, when you do not have a safe legal place to sleep, when you develop PTSD, when you do not have safe protection, when you are woken up at night by Friends of China Camp for the crime of sleeping in your car, your immune system goes down. Your illnesses, your disease goes up. And unfortunately, we've set up our system that anyone can go and be treated at Marin General for extreme cases of health crises. But as soon as they're right on the edge, they will be evicted back onto the streets where they will develop more health crises. It's just common sense, but it's what we do. And ER visits go up for our homeless. Higher policing costs. We say we don't have enough money to house our people. Instead, we pay the police more to harass them. Lower business sales. How do you feel buying a Gucci handbag after walking over several people when you're surrounded by messages of poverty? This may be the 5th wealthiest county by median income in the United States, which is considered a first world country. But it kind of weakens that feeling of abundance and prosperity when the evidence of a single homeless person in your city, in your county, communicates that we are so poor that we cannot even provide safe, legal shelter for our own long-term residents. So it's not the kind of feeling of joy and abundance and hopeful futures that leads to high-ticket sales. Dissociative numbness. If you drive by an elderly man who you've seen on the corner of your street, of your main street, day after day after day, and you don't know his name, and you look at him, the message is clear. Not one of your townspeople has found it important to provide a legal shelter for this person to sleep. Now, what do? What do you have to do in your mind in order for that to seem like an ordinary day? How numb do you have to become for another human being in one of the wealthiest places on the planet? You see, Marin County's median income is higher than almost any per capita income in the entire history of the species. You cannot find a place, any point in time, where you can find a large group of people in the last 100,000 years where they had more per capita than Marin's median income. However, you can find places all around the globe and throughout Earth's history where not a single person in their tribe was homeless. So what do you make of that? That we are more empathic than our ancestors or poorer countries? Like, why can I fly to Thailand and see fewer homeless people than I find in Marin? Is it because the Thai are richer? Are they more intelligent? Or are they more empathic? One must become dissociatively numb to walk by human beings understanding that 6 hours a day of their human life is going up in smoke, because not a single person in your county had the humanity and the competency to house that human being. That's pretty numb. We all become numb through chronic homelessness. Christian hypocrisy is another inevitable fallout of homelessness. You read the Bible and you talk about the poor and the meek and the kindness and helping strangers, and you read about Christ washing the feet of his disciples and championing the disenfranchised and da, 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 da. And then you look and say, what's the majority religion in Marin County? Oh, we're Christian. And then you see 10,000 Christians a day driving past a homeless encampment without doing anything. And it's like, the book says this, we're willing to kill people in a cult that says thou shalt not kill. That's our cult. We say, this is the commandment, we shall not kill. We're willing to go to war and invade other countries. We're willing to burn women and children alive with napalm. We're willing to fight as Christians, but we're not willing to provide safe, legal shelter for our own veterans who fought for us. 8% of our homeless are veterans, by the way. 42% of our homeless have PTSD, including our veterans. What does one do with that? We're Christian, the book says this, and all of these Christians just drove by this homeless person. They even did a study of seminary students preparing for a seminary exam, right? So these are young men, because in a chauvinistic culture, it's unprecedented for women to be able to serve God. So these are young men who are preparing to be priests. And they are told there's an important exam and they shouldn't be late to be priests. And it's a setup, right? So they stage 2 or 3 homeless people on the way to the exam who each ask for some help, who show signs of distress and need. So they are the needy, they're the weak, they're the flock, they're the poor. Every one of the seminary students pushed the homeless aside so that they could get to their exam on how to be good Christians on time, because they did not want to disappoint the priest and were not paying attention to the underlying message. Now, this is a kind of schizophrenia. It's not unique to homelessness by any means. However, it becomes particularly difficult, I think, for anyone to take Christianity seriously and to understand that the homeless people that are in our county, that are growing more by the day, are evaded, walked around, ignored, cursed, blamed by a majority of Christians. Every 24 hours, thousands of contacts, direct divergence from the Bible. So it damages Christianity when a county this wealthy, I mean, it's one thing when, you've got 2 meals and that's all there is, and are you going to eat it or you're going to give it to things? But when you've got 3 cars, a vacation home, I mean, at some point it becomes so dissociative, you have to go crazy. You have to go numb to call yourself a Christian and rush off to make another dollar past a homeless person. It also weakens credibility about America. We get a number of benefits by, for example, having oil denominated in dollars. It's called the petrodollar. We spend more money on our military than the next 5 countries in the world combined. Military strength, it's obviously nothing to do with Christianity. It's fear and terror, the ability to intimidate and coerce. If you look at a number of our political meetings, Fred Burks was an interpreter for Indonesia who at some point decided to go rogue and just say, whether it's a Republican or a Democratic president, this is what I'm being told to interpret. And then this is what's being told in the press. And the U.S. is bullying its allies with fear of military might. And, all they did was they rewrote the interpreting law so that Fred could be sued and put in jail for telling the truth about what he was interpreting, and made all the interpreters sign contracts that nobody could interpret and even tell their wife what they had interpreted. So that's the U.S.'s response to disclosure about its hypocrisy in foreign politics. Now, all of these things, shred a little bit of the nobility, the home of the free, the land of the brave. I mean, when your local building department will not let you move into your own house in case your irrigation system was moved wrong, I mean, how brave do you have to be to pull that off? It's weakening the facade, because who looks at the images of homelessness in America, all around the world, with fascination? This was the country we should learn from? They can't house their own people? It's a joke. The joke is on us, When we behave so divergent from our own stated values, whether they're Christian values or democratic values, you too can have a democracy for the people and by the people, so that the wealthiest people who fund the winner in the democracy, right? It's the democracy, it's not the wealthy people, can pass laws, and you too can be housed, become homeless, because some of the places that I visit who are not democratic, with 20 times less income, have less homelessness. I drive all around. I can't see a single homeless person. Why? Because their government didn't pass 1,000 laws that denied them the right to build. So they're not homeless because they were rescued. They weren't persecuted in the first place. They were just allowed to do what they wanted on their own land. And surprisingly, they all housed themselves. Or unsurprisingly, I mean, you have to go, you have to really search to find people who, without any government persecution, refused to house themselves. In America, it's the government that sends in the bulldozers, that arrests people, but doesn't do anything to house them, right? So America passes laws that increase the cost of housing and that persecute the homeless. In some of these poorer countries, their governments don't have the money to persecute their homeless. So they're not homeless. They're housed on their own land and on family land and park land, etc. In healthy countries, no one harasses the most vulnerable people in the culture. Increased spousal abuse. Again, talk to multiple women, the wrestle in their mind. I cannot afford to live as a single mother in Marin. Should I separate, or should I put up with the abuse? That is the choice that the Marin County Building Department asks of vulnerable single mothers here. Now, okay, so you say, well, no, arrest their husbands who are paying the rent, right? That'll solve the problem, won't it? Take the breadwinner and put him in jail. And then, you see, there's no out, because it's not like the police, having arrested their husband, now pays the rent. No, they're homeless either way. But they are blamed either way. Why didn't you go to the police? Who's going to pay the rent? When we refuse in this culture to give basic income to a single mother, to a single parent. We're too sociopathic to consider this dynamic. We're too hypocritical to deal with this dynamic. So we place it on the burden of the most vulnerable people. Naturally, when 2/3 of Marin residents have trouble making rent or mortgage, increased fear, 2/3 of Marin residents are afraid for themselves or someone they know about housing. We have engineered terror in Marin because we shame people and put them on the street and criminalize them if they can't afford housing. But every year we increase the cost of housing and don't increase their incomes. Do you want to be shamed and on the street? How are you going to deal with that? You create terror. Now we go and bomb other countries pretending to wage war on an emotion, the war on terror. We're terrifying enough people in our own county. We don't need to create more terror for other innocent people. We certainly terrified 1 million innocent Iraqis who are now dead because we were the weapon of mass destruction we went looking for. They're dead. And millions more have PTSD. But what about all the terrified people in Marin who don't know how they're going to make rent next month? What about that terror? How about having a war on sociopathic building practices and reducing the terror in this county? How about a war for human beings rather than a war for the building department? That's a little bit more intelligent. It's a little bit more Christian. It's a little bit more humane. It would help a lot of people who have been long-term Marin residents, some of whom their only crime is they're getting old. And they haven't been able to save enough for retirement and pay the enormous building and housing prices that they have been demanded to live where they were born. We also have increased hostility by our homeless. Now, if you've watched someone, this is, by the way, how the United States military recruits people for ISIS and other terrorist organizations. If you bomb somebody's grandmother and then pretend to be rescuing them, you think they might be a little pissed off? Well, in the wake of both Afghanistan and Iraq, recruitment went up in those areas because everyone grasped that without any evidence and with complete hypocrisy, in the drone warfare that the American military conducts, up to 97% of the casualties for a drone strike are known to be civilians. Does that sound like terrorism to you, or a holy war? Or is it both? In a twisted Christianity in which killing other human beings who don't say the right words is the real drive of the message of love, forgiveness, healing, humanity, taking care of the sick and the needy? It's a very twisted web that harms all of us. We have more recruits lining up in ISIS at the end of our multi-trillion-dollar war on an emotion, which in and of itself communicates our emotional illiteracy. And we are spending more money hurting our homeless and ourselves than we would be allowing them to provide safe legal housing. And it's important to understand that our politicians are not evil. They are Marin residents at scale. We are doing exactly what our parents did. It's just at a bigger scale. We can look at Washington and hopefully understand some of the insanity. But that's not useful unless you can understand that Washington is made of human beings like you and me that are just given a wider scope to express their incompetence, their ignorance. We are emotionally and psychologically illiterate. We are traumatically illiterate. We are not behaving like Christians. And if we don't understand that, and we think it's their problem, we can't look at the absurdity that's happening in our own county. We have engineered the biggest humanitarian crisis in Marin. 12,000 hours of human life goes up in smoke every 24 hours. And it is enforced by laws funded with our tax dollars. That's what we're dealing with, whether it's at a local level or a national level. It's what we're dealing with, or whether it's at a family level. Anyone who pays attention to a family system in America will watch the bizarre ways where the parents, on the one hand, with the left hand, undermine their children in so many ways, and then with their right hand try to rescue them. Undermining and rescuing, there's a schizophrenia. We're not dealing with this as if it's our problem. We're pretending it's out there. It's not. We have to solve this because we're paying the price for these impacts. The hostility of our homeless is predictable. If you've done nothing wrong, but had a job that couldn't afford a $650,000 home after promising that if you did what you were told and worked hard, you could live the American dream, you will feel confused, angry, hurt, hostile, resentful. That's psychology. Every person we threaten with homelessness will feel hostile towards the cult that is engineering their suffering. That, if it goes to the extreme, leads to civil war, but it tears the community apart. It's not healthy. Nobody wins. And if we do absolutely nothing, there will be more homelessness in 10 years than there is now, just like there's more homelessness now than there was 10 years ago, 4 decades running. Higher activity in the reptilian brain. You see, we treat our homeless poorly. You can talk to them. They feel poorly treated. It is a trauma to deny someone safe, legal housing. In a country that values laws more than human beings, because we don't say we're a country of people. We say we are a country of capital and we are a country of law. And you can see instance over instance where humanity has been sublimated in order to enforce a law, even a law that was profoundly destructive. You know, we give the Germans a hard time for obeying Hitler. Hitler had a country of law. They were just cruel laws that harmed the most vulnerable people in the country. We have a culture of law, not of people, of law. You sleep in your car, you're breaking the law. Why? Because we allowed our bureaucrats to pass that law, to punish people for being poor. The police will not apologize for being sociopathic. They will say they are doing their job and upholding the law. We are a culture of law and a culture of capital. We are capitalists and a country of law. But if we use the reptilian brain, which is fear and greed, to write the law and make the capitalist decisions, we will descend into reptiles. The only difference between a human being and a reptile is that a reptile is sociopathic and makes decisions based on fight, flight, and freeze. And a human being has compassion for suffering and does something about it. Well, every single time we see or hear about or experience public money being used to generate homelessness and abuse our most vulnerable people, blood flows to the reptilian brain. Because it should. The reptilian brain is designed to alert us when we are surrounded by sociopaths. Now, this culture is on the sociopathic continuum. On the extreme, you have empathy, you have total sociopathic behavior, total cold-bloodedness. It's cold. It's cold to wake a grandmother up and tell her to move along when she's sleeping in her car in China camp. That is straight reptilian behavior. The officer has to be a reptile. The friends of China camp that hire them have to be reptiles. And the culture that does nothing about it has to be reptilian. Or that grandmother gets a hot bowl of soup, and how can we help? It is sociopathic in an extreme to wake someone up in their own country for the crime of being poor and tell them they can't sleep in their own car as if they wanted to. You think people at 6 years old dreamed, oh, I'll get an education, I'll do this, I'll work my ass off so that I can be harassed by my own police because I can't afford housing that has been made illegal? Of course not. These people are doing what they can to stay alive in a reptilian environment. And anytime any of us sees that behavior, ding, 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 sociopaths in the room, watch out, fight, flight, freeze. Reptilian behavior is contagious. Blood to the reptilian brain and trauma is contagious. If you watch someone who is a human being be abused financially, sexually, emotionally, physically, you will be alert that you are in danger, that sociopaths have power in your cult. Every one of us gets that message to our brain when we see a homeless person. And the fact that the homeless are blamed is a very disturbing thing if you're a sociologist and looking at Marin County. You will predict a descent into violence and into more sociopathic behavior based on what we're doing. You know, they didn't start off gassing the Jews. They first put stars on them and labeled them and segmented them and blamed them. That's the first step. The gassing came later. It is not a good sign when low-cost housing has been made illegal. It is not a good sign when 6 hours a day of human life per person is going up in smoke and no one's doing anything about it. It's not a good day. It's a loud day for the reptilian brain. You may or may not be paying attention to it, but when you see another homeless person, more blood to the reptilian brain, which means less blood to the empathic brain. Why? Because it hurts. It hurts to know that we could have all the money in the world and we would still not house our people. That hurts. Because the Thai are doing it on $300 a month. And we can't do it with an average salary of over $11,000. We can't do it. We could, but we won't. Why? What is it about our physiology that we will not do what the Miwok could and would do for their own people 500 years ago? It's alarming if you understand psychology and you understand how the brain works. One must be sociopathic to walk by someone with PTSD on the street and do nothing about it. We demand that level of sociopathic numbness when we as a culture instead persecute and create more homelessness. So, higher crime and criminalization of the most vulnerable. I talked with one homeless woman, and she said that she commits 4 crimes every single day in her effort to survive. Now, the crimes are engineered by the law. She's not allowed to urinate in the forest. Well, every time she needs to, she commits a crime. She's not allowed to sleep where she sleeps, so she's committing a crime for going to the bathroom, for sleeping, for trespassing, and for asking for money so she can live. Those are her crimes. Now, all you have to do to make the entire country criminals is pass laws that say breathing is a crime. You need to sleep in order to survive. You need to breathe. We've made all the low-cost housing illegal. What are you going to do? Die? Is that a crime? You know, murder is supposed to be a crime. What about the murder committed by 1,000 laws enforced with public money, all of which put affordable housing out of reach? Are those crimes? They're crimes against humanity. You feel less human coming out of the Marin Community Development Agency, an agency that has not developed a single community in its existence, but which has consistently raised the cost of housing for 50 years, irrespective of people's ability to afford the homes. Why is this not an issue to human beings? So, once you tell someone that it is a crime to live, they're much more willing to commit other crimes because they realize the game is rigged. Because it is. It's rigged against the most vulnerable people in our culture. Increased sexual abuse is obvious. I talked to one young woman. She didn't want to be woken up by the police for sleeping in her car. Her crime, she was poor. She wanted to finish college. The only way she could finish college was sleeping in her car. Only her city passed a law saying it was illegal to sleep in her car. What does she do? Does she drop out of college? No. She works around her police department by parking in the shadows where they don't come and wake her up. The problem is that's where the gangs hang out. Now, if the police were doing their job, they'd go where the gangs hang out, right? But no, they bother the homeless. She's in the shadows, hiding from the police so she can finish college sleeping in her car. And she's gang raped by 5 men. She doesn't report the crime because it would be more of a disturbance to be harassed for sleeping in her car than it was to be gang raped. She was more afraid of the police and still hid from them after being gang raped. A young woman learns before finishing her college degree that the police are more of a threat to her in Marin County than being gang raped. That's what we're teaching people when we pass a law saying it is illegal to sleep in your car, but it is not illegal to charge monopoly fees that increase the cost of housing above the rate that 60% of Marin residents can afford. Splitting the community. The more sociopathic behavior goes on, the more factions there are, the criminals and the non-criminals, the rich, the poor, the housed, the unhoused. It's divisive. You have fewer risky startups and less innovation. Imagine if Steve Jobs, starting Apple Computer, had to pay $5,000 a month rent. The higher the housing costs are as a percentage of income, the less innovative one can be. Because as any entrepreneur will tell you that's done a few company startups, your biggest risk is running out of money before your startup gets off the ground. Running out of money before you see a profit. Now, by making all low-cost housing illegal in Marin, you increase the burn rate. There's no shack for $100 a month in someone's backyard. No, you'll be evicted, right? And hauled off to prison for sleeping in a shack, right? There's no workaround. You're criminalized for doing what Elon Musk did, which was sleep in the office. Don't let Marin Planning Department catch you sleeping in the office next to your computer so you can code and start Zip2, so you can start PayPal, so that you can start the most successful car company in the world. They'll evict you on the spot. Who cares that that'll bring hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs? Who cares if that'll be the future of innovation? We don't care. We're interested in curtailing your freedom, in raising your cost of housing for your own good, right? So many of the startups that lead to the high prices in Marin Home as Marin imports the most intelligent coders from around the world to work at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Tesla, would not be driving up the price of Marin homes if innovative people had not had the guts to work years at a time with no payout. And they couldn't have done it paying $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 a month rent. Those startups got off the ground when Marin housing was cheap 50 years ago. Now that it's been driven up by the success of those cheap startups cannot afford to start in Marin. It's too risky and we kill innovation. You also have higher levels of insanity. Because when you look at all of these impacts, and you understand that we're spending $40,000 to $80,000 a year to create and sustain each homeless person, that the full cost to the culture and to all of our government agencies is $40,000 to $80,000 per year for each homeless person to create them, to enforce the laws that create them, and then keep them homeless indefinitely. But we wouldn't actually pay even $20,000 to house them. This is insane. This is insane. We're doing it. It's insane. We've been doing it for 40 years. It's insane. We're not going to do anything about it. It's insane. We're going to keep doing exactly what we've always done. Insanity goes up. Schizophrenia goes up. Because if you ask the average Marin resident, would you like more fires? They'll say no. Are you going to do anything about your homelessness? No, it's not my problem. That's insane. Would you like to have higher taxes go to ER visits than it would take to keep someone healthy in the first place? No. Are you going to go down and talk with your building department to get them to cut the permit fees? No, I'm not going to do that. I want this result, but I'm going to do this action that creates this result. That's insanity. We are revealing the depth of our insanity. It's not good for anyone. It's crazy. It's important to understand we are crazy. For much of the world, it was a wake-up call watching the US around COVID to spend more money than most countries in the world, to have higher deaths and more schizophrenic confusion. That's a macrocosm of Marin. The United States behavior around COVID tells the world what Marin is doing at a micro level. We're surrounded by tech and app and billionaires, and none of them figure out how to help their people. Is this the future of the planet if they just copy us so that they can have civil wars? And it's insane. The fact that we are spending public money to create higher and higher housing costs, and then more public money to punish people for being homeless, is a direct corruption in power, which leads to more corruption. You try and get any of the people, I will follow this video if any official would like to do an in-depth interview with me about homelessness, and I will email every single government employee in Marin this video. If you do not see an interview or series of interviews below this video, it is because I, as an owner of a local nonprofit, as a local business owner, as a concerned citizen, have been stonewalled by every single person I've asked for an interview. Now, if you understand anything about psychology, you understand that when politicians are proud of their policies, know their stuff, and want to tell the world about what they're doing, they will do an interview. And you understand that when they're confused and incompetent, they will come up with every excuse imaginable not to do an interview so that they can look good and stay in power while being completely incompetent to do what they were hired to do. I've got a record of every person shunting and putting the blame to the next person. Go talk to so-and-so. No, you go talk to so-and-so. You can go on a wonderful track all the way around the Marin County government, just sending emails to people and watching them tell you to talk to someone else so that they can tell you to talk to someone else. And you just go round and round. I think it's a wonderful email because it's a testimony to our cowardice and incompetence in government. There's nothing unique about our politicians. They're just people like you and me who don't know anything more than you and I know, which is a testament to our education system, which is a testament to our teachers and our principals who are just you and me, who obviously don't know how to design an education system. We're just mirrored constantly by our own stupidity and incompetence. And rather than face up to the fact, we like to pretend that it's not our business, it's somebody else's fault. That is the surest way to go nowhere in a hurry. I will talk and do an in-depth interview to anyone in any branch of government, and you can see that the competency in the nonprofit sector is higher. It's not complete. Many nonprofits will not talk to me. Why? They're not doing a very good job. So nonprofits a little bit more competent than government. Not a single government official or employee that I've talked to will talk to me on camera. They'll talk to me off camera, and they'll agree with many things off camera. They just won't talk to me on camera because an incompetent and corrupt boss would punish them for telling the truth and saving lives. Ding, 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 ding. We're dealing with reptiles. 12,000 hours of human life every 24 hours going up in smoke in Marin amongst the most vulnerable demographic. This has been going on for decades. And we're worried about so-and-so at the top of the power chain looking good, who isn't homeless. You see, the key way to differentiate between the reptilian and the empathic brain is this. When the people with the most power, the most money, the most rank in the cult, look to the people in the most pain, look around them and say, who is in the most pain? How can we help? You are dealing with a human being. You're dealing with an empath. You're dealing with the empathic center of the brain that separates us from animals. When you're dealing with reptiles, when you're dealing with sociopaths, it's how can I get the most for me who's already at the top? And exploit those who are most vulnerable and in the most pain. A reptile attacks people they can win in a fight, directly or indirectly, passively or actively. They exploit and take advantage of the vulnerable because it's easy to beat them. It's easy to pass housing laws that benefit millionaire real estate investors. In fact, if you look at who benefits from the fact that housing prices have gone up and up and up and will go up indefinitely unless there is an intervention to break the monopoly cycle. Builders, contractors such as myself, real estate agents, bankers and banks, mortgage brokers, architects, county tax collectors, building official, all the employees around the building infrastructure, the road department, all that. Every single one of this group makes more money when the average price of housing goes up $100,000, which it keeps doing in Marin. The average price was $450,000. The average price is $550,000. The average price is that we're now well over $1 million. This group benefits every law that is passed, and it's very self-serving at the building department and with the tax collectors because when they make permitting more expensive, they get more money. When houses sell for more money because permitting was more expensive and you can't ask builders or homeowners to sell the property for less than they paid for it, they make more money again. And they make more money on the property sale. So it's triple taxation. Marin County makes a ton of money making building one of the most expensive enterprises and the most frustrating enterprises in the world. Marin County can safely say that around the entire planet, it is more frustrating and expensive to construct legal housing than 99% of the planet throughout human history. That took a lot of work. And if you talk with the people at Marin County Community Development, Curtis was proud of this fact. In fact, he encouraged me not to even buy my land if I wanted to build something cost-effective. He said, yeah, I wouldn't buy the land, right? That's community development. Don't even bother buy the land. We're going to give you such a hard time. Now, if Curtis wants to come on camera and talk about his policies and why he's proud to make Marin the most expensive place to build in the country, we might understand just how thoroughly our government and our tax dollars have been utilized for 50 years to make all forms of low-cost housing illegal in Marin. But that would take sincerity. That would take empathy for the most vulnerable and poor members in our community. And that's not what you experience when dealing with local government officials and their building departments. There is a cold, reptilian efficiency as thousands burn by the sentence. Just do this, just do this, just do this. All of it increasing the cost of housing. Or be homeless. Reduce trust. How can you trust your community if they have stood by while your only crime was not being able to afford a $650,000 home? When everyone says that's not my business. What? My homelessness is nobody's business? After working my ass off for 30 years? Reduced trust, rightfully so. Anyone who trusts the system in Marin after being rendered homeless is a fool, because a competent and empathic culture would not have rendered them homeless. It was homeless by design. Every one of those laws that increased the cost of housing was misspent public money with no regard for the most vulnerable people. Even the builders, I interview them. I interview the employees. Like Plath Construction builds a lot of the $10, $20 million homes in Tiburon, etc. Talk with their employees. They drive to work from 1 to 2 hours out of Marin. Why? They can't afford. They're building $10 to $20 million homes and they can't afford to live in the county that they work. We talk about environmental sensitivity. If half the workers have to drive an hour in gas-guzzling cars and trucks, pickup trucks, to build their $10 and $20 million home, is this a place for human beings to live or billionaires? An empath asks, who's in the most pain? How can I help? A sociopath asks, how can I use my dominance and strength to get more for me with no regard for anyone else or its impact? People are dying. 12,000 hours of human life. 24 hours. 24 hours. You can't even get an interview in Marin County to discuss this topic. If you ask the average official, how many hours have you spent in the last 365 days educating yourself about homelessness and doing something about the most vulnerable, traumatized people in our midst? Some of them will say 30 minutes. Now, if you're killing people at 12,000 hours of human life every 24 hours, is 30 minutes adequate if you still haven't solved the problem? It is to a reptile. But to an empath, to a human being, is that adequate? I'm not getting paid. I'm heartbroken coming back from poor, quote-unquote, countries that know how to take care of their people to the 5th wealthiest county in the United States, my home, and seeing more homelessness decade after decade after decade as my public officials increase the cost of housing. I do not want reptiles spending my tax dollars to hunt down the most vulnerable human beings in my county. And I'd like to see a little more anger from any human being in our midst. Because reptiles do not respond to pain of other people. They respond to fear of their own positions. Reptiles are cowards. They're not human beings. And if you watch the recorded meetings in San Rafael, in the county around homelessness, you do not see human beings worried about the people they have made homeless. You see reptiles congratulating themselves and getting their positions locked in. If we want to descend into animals and systemically kill our people, let's at least be honest about it, rather than pretending Hitler is the bad guy. He started off gassing Germans, disabled, poor, with learning disabilities. We're killing our homeless. 12,000 hours of life every day. You cannot trust that system because it is killing our most vulnerable people, our elderly. Our new graduates with high college debts are being pummeled by our system. Now you also, the final obvious impact is poorer health. When you're woken up in the middle of the night at China Camp for the crime of sleeping in your car, which you've adapted to for the crime of not being able to afford a $650,000 house, your immune system goes down. Your susceptibility to disease goes up. When you don't have a car, when you have PTSD, 42% of our homeless have PTSD. If they didn't have PTSD when they were first put on the street, by the time they've been stolen from, ignored, blamed, cursed, and woken up in the middle of the night for the crime of sleeping in their car, they soon develop it. People with PTSD do not complete their course of antibiotics. Surprise, surprise. This would be obvious in a traumatically literate culture, but we are not traumatically literate. How many of you have read The Body Keeps the Score? Why isn't it recommended in high school? It's a lot more useful than The Catcher in the Rye. But when have we wanted hard scientific data over whimsy and repeating the mistakes of the past? We are a traumatically illiterate culture. So it may seem strange to some of you, to some of us, why someone would only take half of a course of antibiotics when they got sick on the street, went to the ER, and were given a prescription. Well, anyone who's been banned from driving in a bus because they had more than 3 bags and they're lugging their possessions around, well, that's one of the things we do to persecute our homeless. It could be a completely empty train. It can be a completely empty bus. You're not allowed to carry your possessions onto the train or the bus. How are you going to get to the pharmacy? You're going to allow your stuff to be stolen? Are you going to forget after you start feeling better after an initial relief of symptoms from the first couple of antibiotics? Are you going to forget to take the other ones when you've lost your sleep cycle because barbier security woke you up in the middle of the night, you didn't get a good night's sleep, and you lost your routine? It is an absolute fact that not continuing and completing the full course of antibiotics, that this phenomena is several 100% higher in the homeless population. Now, this is something you may not have considered we don't educate anyone about homelessness. That's why I'm filling in here. Nobody told me any of this. It took time to extract the data out of a cult that does not want to look at its incompetence in this area. Well, that's the fact. 300% or more likelihood of not completing the full course of antibiotics. Now, here's the thing. Germs are not hypocrites. Germs are not racist. Germs are not sexist. And germs are not capitalists. Neither are viruses. You see, all the viruses that are moving around the planet in increasing quantities with planes and all the various transportation do not care which host body they enter. They are looking to enter the species of human beings, of humanity. They'll enter a dirty, sick, sleep-deprived, cold person on the street as willingly as they will enter a billionaire with the best health care coverage. You see, but here's how it works. Someone on the street doesn't complete their full course of antibiotics. They've got other things to worry about because we've given them other things to worry about. A mutation occurs in their body. It would occur in anybody who doesn't complete their full course of antibiotics. But it occurs in their body because they're dealing with 3 times the trauma and pressure on a 24-hour period than anyone housed in Marin. That's why it's occurring in their body. However, the virus is not racist. The virus doesn't say, oh, I'm only going to enter you because you're a homeless person. I would never dream of going into a gated community. The virus doesn't care about your income. It doesn't care about your degrees at Harvard. It doesn't care if you work in the building department. Having mutated in a traumatized individual persecuted by their local government, it spreads to another homeless person and another, and then, surprise, surprise, it moves to people who are housed, to people who would always take their antibiotics. Now, you and I have a strain that is antibiotic resistant. And Marin County is breeding antibiotic-resistant strains of disease by systemically traumatizing its homeless and failing to address this fact, and not bothering to own the issue, as viruses breed year after year after year, mutate year after year after year. The next COVID may come from Marin. It may just as well come from cities all across America who are copying Marin's sociopathic housing policies. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Once a virus has mutated to an antibiotic-resistant status and spreads without the community with no regard for income, education, or status, everyone pays the price. Everyone pays the price. Now, we pretend we don't have enough money to house people in tents. Oh, we just don't have enough money. It's a $100 tent, right? We couldn't possibly offer a little police protection. No, that's too expensive. Give people dignity and value? No, it's too much. We can't do it. We've just shattered our economy. by creating hyperinflation, printing trillions of dollars for one disease that we didn't have an answer for. Wouldn't it be ironic if the next COVID came out of Marin, not out of a wet market? No, we just kept traumatizing our homeless people, and not taking care of them when they're cold. And they kept not taking the full course of antibiotics because they had other things on their mind. And then it entered the population. That's how diseases work. Diseases will thank the building department, Marin community development agencies, for creating such fertile hosts in traumatized, homeless individuals, for waking them up in the middle of the night, courtesy of Friends of China Camp, who won't talk about why they're doing this. You see, there's silence around sociopathic behavior of this nature. We are breeding disease in Marin, systematically. Now, if you don't care enough about other human beings who are poor because you're a capitalist, how about your billionaire friends who are just as susceptible to a new virus? If you don't care about them either, where did you learn your programming? Where were you raised that you had so much disgust for your own species? Diseases are not racist and they're not capitalist. They will enter any vulnerable body in the species and will spread. And the impact of homelessness is that for every individual we make homeless, we increase their likelihood of getting sick by hundreds of %. For everyone that gets sick and starts a course of antibiotics, we increase the likelihood they will not complete the cycle by several hundreds of %. You think if you just got raped by 5 men hiding from the police, you'd think, I better take my antibiotics so that the culture doesn't get sick who set me up in this ridiculous fiasco? Or have you got other things on your mind? You see? It's common sense that isn't very common. It's not hard or expensive to provide safe, legal places to sleep for every one of our residents. It's not hard to reverse the law to say, sure, head out to China Camp and have a sleep in your van. We'll patrol and protect you from being raped. It's not hard. It's just human. It's not hard to look at your Bible and see, who are the poor and the meek and the hungry and let's go do something for our homeless. It's not hard. It's Christian. Do we want to be human beings? Do we want to be Christian? Do we want to be intelligent? Do we want to be scientific? Do we want to make money? We are losing money, losing morals, going against science, going against health, and denying our own humanity every day that homelessness exists in Marin County. Tents cost $100. Air mattresses, another $50. Sleeping bags, $50. We have empty fields. It's not expensive to reduce the arcane laws that persecute our people. It's human and it's intelligent.